The crowbar shattered the greenhouse glass with a single vicious swing.
This is a drug den. We are taking back our neighborhood.
Neighbors poured through the broken panes, uprooting plants and toppling lab benches.
Do not leave a single plant standing. This poison ends today.
In minutes, the greenhouse was unrecognizable. Shattered glass, trampled greenery, and soil scattered like a war zone.
Get a picture of this. Everyone needs to see what we found.
She uploaded the photos with the caption "Drug Dealer in Our Hood" and tagged every local news outlet.
The HOA just took out the trash. Let this be a warning to anyone else.
But as the sun set on the wreckage, something did not add up. The plants had medical labels. Why would a drug den operate openly with federal inspection certificates on the wall? 3 weeks earlier, Anthony Reeves walked through his greenhouse with the quiet focus of a man who had nothing to hide.
These buds are stabilizing perfectly. The trial patients will have consistent medication.
On the wall hung his DEA Schedule I research license, one of only 7 ever issued.
Epilepsy and PTSD. These plants could change lives if people understood the science.
We have a suspected drug operation in our community. I have proof.
The room buzzed with alarm. Margaret Whitfield knew exactly how to weaponize fear.
A complaint? About my greenhouse? I'll send them the federal documentation.
It's a drug lab, I'm telling you. We need to organize a citizen's inspection.
I'll be back next Monday. The greenhouse is secure.
But by the time he left for his conference, the petitions had already been circulated. Margaret went door to door that evening, a clipboard full of signatures and a smile sharp enough to cut glass.
This man is growing drugs next to your children. I've seen the plants through the fence.
She left out the cameras recording every entry point, and the federal license stenciled on the door.
At the monthly meeting, she held up photographs taken from behind the fence. These are not tomato plants. This is a criminal enterprise hiding in plain sight.
The HOA newsletter arrived in Anthony's inbox while he was registering for the pharmacology symposium.
More HOA nonsense. I'll handle it when I get back.
He turned off his phone and straightened his name badge, more concerned about his presentation than the wildfire Margaret had lit. Back on their street, the first neighborhood watch signs went up, targeting a federal researcher. Margaret Whitfield was already planning the catch. Margaret gathered 4 of her most radicalized neighbors in her living room that night.
We've waited long enough. The so-called researcher is conveniently out of town.
She unzipped a duffel bag, revealing crowbars, bolt cutters, and heavy work gloves.
This is our moment. We'll inspect the site ourselves and remove every plant.
One neighbor mentioned the federal certificate on the door, but Margaret waved it off as counterfeit.
A piece of paper doesn't make a drug operation legal. I've already called the sheriff's office.
They set Saturday morning for the raid, less than 48 hours away.
I'll live stream it on the community page. Everyone needs to see what we find.
She handed out the crowbars like party favors, her smile colder than the steel. The trap was baited. Anthony was 1,000 miles away at a conference, and his greenhouse was about to become a federal crime scene. Margaret led her small army through the broken gate, crowbars raised like torches.
Don't stop. If it looks like drugs, it comes down.
The delicate plants, each labeled with a patient trial number, were ripped from their beds.
Record everything. This is our proof.
Within an hour, her post had 400 shares and climbing, fueled by outrage and ignorance. A cluster of buds, meant for a child's epilepsy trial, lay crushed under a work boot.
We did it! The HOA protects its own.
Comments flooded in, heroes, and lock him up beneath the photo of the wreckage. By sunset, the greenhouse was a skeleton of bent frames and shattered glass, and Margaret Whitfield stood in the middle of her victory, unaware she had just committed a federal crime. A neighbor's panicked message buzzed on Anthony's phone. They took crowbars to your greenhouse. Everything is destroyed. Please call me.
That can't be. I left the facility locked and alarmed. Who would dare break into a federal site and destroy everything?
He cut his Q&A session short and was out the door before the moderator could announce the next speaker. The drive back was a black blur of fear and fury, his mind cycling through possible suspects, but never landing on the truth. When he pulled into his driveway, the sight of mangled glass and uprooted plants hit him with the force of a physical blow. He knelt beside a crushed row of seedlings, his hands shaking as he sifted through soil and glass shards. Medical labels littered the ground. Trial EP12, PTSD-B4, each one a lost patient dose.
You, what have you done? This is a federally licensed research facility, not a drug den.
License? A piece of paper doesn't make it legal. I've already called the police. They'll sort out your lies.
Sure enough, the whine of a siren approached, and a sheriff's deputy parked at the curb, stepping out with a cautious stare. The deputy approached, his eyes narrowing at the shattered glass. He looked from Margaret to Anthony for an explanation.
I'm Margaret Whitfield, HOA president. We found a drug operation and took action. This man is a criminal. Arrest him immediately.
Anthony held up a hand. Before you do anything, officer, let me show you something. He walked to the greenhouse office and retrieved a framed certificate.
This is a DEA Schedule I research license. My facility is federally authorized to cultivate cannabis for FDA-approved clinical trials.
The deputy took the license, his brows furrowing as he scanned the official seals and signatures. His professional demeanor cracked. He had almost made the biggest mistake of his career. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, we need a DEA unit at this address. Confirm a federal research facility has been compromised.
What? No, he's lying. That's a fake certificate. I demand you arrest him right now.
The deputy ignored her, handing the license back to Anthony with a look that bordered on reverence. Within minutes, the first DEA agent arrived, his windbreaker crisp and his expression unreadable. The DEA agent scanned the shattered greenhouse, then turned to Anthony with a measured nod.
It's authentic. This is one of only 7 licensed cannabis research facilities in the country. Destroying it is a federal offense. Conspiracy to interfere with controlled substance research carries serious prison time.
This can't be happening. I was protecting my community. You can't do this.
The agent nodded to the deputy. Margaret Whitfield was handcuffed, her magenta blazer wrinkled as she was led to the patrol car. Anthony watched in silence. The exoneration should have felt like justice, but all he saw were the ruined trial doses and the faces of patients he'd never met.
3 years of growth, gone in an hour. The trial will be halted, and those kids will suffer because of a rumor.
The DEA team cordoned off the area as a federal crime scene, documenting every snapped stem and shattered label. Word traveled fast. By morning, the U.S. Attorney's Office had opened a case file, and the halted clinical trials were already making headlines. Margaret sat in a holding cell, still refusing to believe that her moral crusade had landed her in the middle of a federal investigation. 2 days later, a call from the National Institutes of Health shattered Anthony's fragile silence.
Mr. Reeves, your crop was the sole supply for a critical trial. Without it, dozens of patients are left untreated.
So many lives. And I was worried about a presentation.
Dr. Patel's voice was steady, but the words cut deep. The NIH would have to suspend the study indefinitely. Letters went out to families that morning. In a modest house across town, Greg and Sarah Whitfield read the news together.
The trial closed? That was Emma's only chance. What do we tell her?
We find the man running it. He owes us answers.
Days later, Anthony stood before a gathering of the trial's families in a sterile conference room, his apology caught in his throat.
I can't promise a timeline, but I will rebuild. The science must continue for their sake.
Emma's next seizure would come without the only treatment that had ever worked, because a woman too arrogant to ask questions had destroyed it all. By the end of the week, the story had jumped from local news to national headlines. The headline, "Federally Licensed Facility Destroyed by Vigilante HOA," turned public sympathy sharply against Margaret. Some neighbors deleted their posts in shame, while others spun conspiracy theories about a government cover-up. Margaret's defense attorney claimed she had acted in good faith, but the public wasn't buying it. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed formal charges: conspiracy to interfere with controlled substance research, a federal felony,
I was trying to protect my neighborhood. How was I supposed to know it was a government facility?
I can't comment publicly. I just need to make this right for the patients.
The court set a trial date. Legal experts predicted Margaret would plead guilty to avoid a harsher sentence. Some neighborhood watch signs came down, but others stayed, now a bitter symbol of division. The federal case was set, but for the families waiting on the trial, justice had only just begun. Greg sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the day's news. The name Margaret Whitfield kept repeating.
Whitfield. That's our name. But it can't be.
He pushed back from the table and dug into a trunk of old family albums. His hands trembled as he turned the pages. There she was, Margaret Whitfield, his mother, in the same magenta blazer, standing at an HOA meeting years ago.
She destroyed the greenhouse. She stopped the trial. That's Emma's medication.
The realization hit like a physical blow. He sank into the chair, the photo slipping from his fingers.
How do I tell Sarah that her daughter's only chance was destroyed by her own grandmother?
Sarah entered with a cup of tea, asking if he had found anything new about the person who ruined the trial.
I don't know how much longer Emma can wait. Greg, did you see anything online?
Greg could only shake his head, the secret already corroding his insides as he stared at Emma's photo on the shelf.
Sarah, I found out who destroyed the greenhouse. It's my mother, Margaret. She led the raid.
Your mother? That woman is the reason Emma is suffering? She took away her only treatment?
The next morning, they drove to the county jail in a silence that was louder than any argument. Margaret shuffled into the visiting room, her orange jumpsuit a stark replacement for the magenta blazer she once flaunted.
Greg, Sarah, what are you doing here? I never expected to see you.
We came to ask you one question, Mom. Do you know what you really destroyed? Your raid stopped the trial that was keeping your own granddaughter alive. Emma has epilepsy. She was in that study.
What? No, that can't be Emma. I didn't know. I never would have. Oh, God.
You never would have what? Asked a single question before destroying her only chance? We're done. Emma will never know you.
Margaret's face crumbled as the truth swallowed her whole. She would never be able to take back what she did. They left the jail with a decision already made. They would protect Emma at any cost.
She can never be near Emma again. We have to make it official.
I'll call the lawyer today. I won't let her try to see Emma when she gets out.
They filed an emergency petition for a restraining order, citing the emotional harm and the destruction of the trial. The judge granted the order the same day. Margaret Whitfield was legally barred from any contact with her granddaughter.
I never imagined I'd have to do this, but Emma comes first.
The family court filing was a final severance. What little hope Margaret had of reconciliation was now extinguished. Greg stood in Emma's room, staring at her empty bed. The weight of the decision was crushing.
My own mother did this. How do I explain to Emma when she's older that her grandma stole her medicine?
The rift was now legal and permanent. Margaret's actions had not only destroyed a research facility, they had destroyed her family. The federal trial of Margaret Whitfield opened on a cold morning. The gallery was packed with reporters and the families whose lives she had upended. The prosecution laid out its case with clinical precision: a vigilante mob, a destroyed federal facility, and a halted medical trial. Anthony Reeves took the stand, his tone calm, but no one in the room missed the grief behind it.
Each plant I grew was a dose for a child with epilepsy or a veteran with PTSD. The study was their only hope.
The defense attorney's objections were briskly overruled. Margaret sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the table. Dr. Patel took the stand next, her voice steady as she detailed the suspended trial.
When the greenhouse was destroyed, we lost the entire year's supply. Patients who had been seizure-free for months are now back in emergency rooms.
The jury members exchanged glances. The weight of the testimony was crushing. In the gallery, Greg and Sarah Whitfield clutched their daughter's photo, their anger barely restrained. The court recessed with the prosecution's case hanging heavy in the air. The hardest testimony was still to come. The next morning, the prosecution called Greg Whitfield to the stand. A tense murmur rippled through the gallery.
I'm Margaret Whitfield's son, and my daughter Emma was in the trial she destroyed.
Margaret jolted upright in her chair, her face draining of color. Her attorney's pen froze mid-note. The prosecutor stepped closer. And who led the raid that halted that trial, Mr. Whitfield?
She did. The defendant, my mother, handed out crowbars to her neighbors. She called it a citizen's raid.
Gasps erupted from the gallery. Sarah clutched Emma's photo, tears streaming.
Emma was seizure-free for 8 months on that medication. Now she's back in the hospital. Because of you.
Margaret buried her face in her hands. Her attorney offered no objection. There was nothing to say. The prosecutor turned to the jury. No further questions. The silence that followed was deafening. In a single morning, Margaret Whitfield had lost her reputation, her defense, and the last remnants of her family. The closing arguments were brief. The defense could offer no excuse that outweighed a father's testimony about his daughter back in a hospital bed. The judge's instructions were simple. Decide whether Margaret Whitfield knowingly participated in the destruction of a federal research site. The jury retired to deliberate. In the gallery, families of the trial patients held hands. Greg and Sarah sat rigidly. 2 hours later, the jury returned. The foreman stood, a single sheet of paper in his hand. On the charge of conspiracy to interfere with controlled substance research, we find the defendant guilty. Margaret's body jerked as if struck. Her attorney placed a steadying hand on her arm, but it was useless. A low cry rose from the gallery. Sarah buried her face in Greg's shoulder. The other families wept openly. The judge read the verdict into the record. Margaret Whitfield was now a convicted federal felon. Bailiffs approached to take her into custody. Her life as a free woman was over. Sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. The courtroom emptied, but the weight of the day would linger in those halls. 6 weeks later, the same courtroom, Margaret Whitfield entered in prison clothes, her magenta blazer long gone. The prosecutor called Greg and Sarah Whitfield. Greg's voice cracked as he described Emma's last seizure.
She begged me to make it stop. The medicine she needs was in those plants that day.
We trusted you to care for Emma, and you destroyed her only chance.
Anthony Reeves addressed the court next, his voice steady but heavy.
I lost 3 years of research, but the real loss is the children who will never receive this medication.
The judge looked at Margaret for a long moment, then pronounced the sentence. 5 years in federal prison, with the recommendation for restitution to the families. Margaret's face crumpled, but no one in the gallery felt sympathy. Bailiffs took her away for the last time, the courtroom emptying into a heavy silence. Within months of the sentencing, the Whitfields and other families filed a civil rights suit against Margaret and the HOA that enabled her.
She took away our daughter's medicine. We want an admission that what she did was wrong, and the resources to fix it.
The court ruled in their favor, awarding damages that would fully fund an expanded clinical trial at NIH.
With this funding, we can restart the trial and even include more patients. It's the second chance we all prayed for.
Anthony stood on the cleared ground where his old greenhouse had been, blueprints rolled under his arm. He was not looking back.
This one will be twice the size. We can't let ignorance stop science again.
From the rubble, a single seedling had survived. Anthony potted it himself as a symbol that the research would continue. Greg and Sarah watched an old video of Emma giggling before her diagnosis. They held on to the hope that she might laugh again. The new greenhouse rose faster than the old one, funded by the very settlement that had exposed the cost of blind prejudice. The trial was back on, but the hardest waiting was still ahead for Emma, and for all the families who held their breath each day. The phone call Gregory Whitfield had begun to believe would never come finally arrived. Emma had been selected for the new clinical trial at NIH.
She starts next month. It's real, Sarah. After everything, she's going to get the medicine.
I was so afraid we'd lost it all. I won't let myself hope yet, but maybe this time.
A week after the news, they made the drive to a place they had once associated with grief.
Welcome. I've been expecting you.
He led them through the sparkling new greenhouse, past trays of cannabis plants, each marked with a child's name or a patient ID.
This is Emma's row. We've already propagated the cuttings. In 3 months, she'll have her first dose.
We treated you like an enemy when we first met. How can you be so generous?
Because I know what it's like to lose hope. I'm just trying to give it back.
They drove home as the sun set, a small terracotta pot on the seat between them, a seedling pushing up through the soil. In the hollow quiet of her prison cell, Margaret Whitfield received a plain white envelope with no return address. She drew out a single photograph. Emma in a hospital bed, fragile but alive, a faint, brave smile on her lips. A note in Gregory's handwriting, "She's in the trial now, but you will never see her again."
I destroyed her chance and now I can't even hold her hand to say I'm sorry.
In the corner of her cell hung the magenta blazer she was arrested in, now a ghost of her former self. That night, she sat at the narrow metal desk and began to write.
I was so sure I was right that I never asked the only question that mattered.
She wrote for an hour, but the words felt hollow. She folded the letter and slid it under her pillow, unsent. In a different hospital room, Emma's first infusion began, while Margaret counted the years of her sentence. The magenta blazer would never be worn again, a relic of the woman who chose outrage over understanding. 6 months later, the greenhouse was a cathedral of green, each labeled row a promise kept. Anthony Reeves accepted a National Research Award, but set the plaque aside to check the day's trial data. On a warm afternoon, Emma had a day without seizures. She sat in the grass, drawing a butterfly. Greg recorded it and sent the clip to Anthony with 2 words, "She's laughing." At the greenhouse entrance, a small bronze plaque now bore the names of the original trial patients. Among them, Emma Whitfield, a reminder that resilience had grown from the most destructive ignorance. The original survivor plant now stood nearly 5 feet tall in the center of the facility, a living symbol.
This one survived because it had to, just like Emma.
The families of the trial now met monthly in the glass house, sharing progress and setbacks, a community forged in pain. No one mentioned Margaret Whitfield. Her name belonged to another chapter, one they had all closed. Anthony still spent his mornings with the survivor plant. It required no reminder of what had been lost. The federal license was framed beside the door, unchanged, but the world around it had shifted completely. Emma grew stronger in inches. Her medical bracelet was still there, but so was the paint on her fingers. She drew crosses for butterflies, stars for the medication she called My Green Light. The families no longer defined themselves by Margaret's crime. They defined themselves by the trial's second breath.
Science isn't about who was right, it's about what survives.
The plaque at the greenhouse gate caught the morning sun, names glinting like keepsakes. Somewhere, in a prison cell, a magenta blazer gathered dust. But that story was no longer the one that mattered. This story ended not with a verdict, but with a single plant reaching toward the glass, and a child who could finally breathe.